Good morning! This is Will Faber from Art to Ride, and we are in White House, Ohio, giving a clinic here with all our friends. We'll show everybody over here, wave and say hello. And Karen's going to do a little saddle fit demonstration for everybody because we've had so many people ask for that on the website. So here we go.
This is a horse that yesterday, when we watched it move, it couldn't move. And it became quite obvious that the saddle was impeding the horse's movement, especially in the shoulders. So as a trainer, the last thing we want to do is to make it difficult for the horse to do what we're asking it to do, correct? That's where they get unhappy and they get resentful and stuff, because we're asking them to lift their back, carry themselves, and their saddle is restricting them from doing that, and actually can be painful. So if you hit on certain areas of the horse's back, we call them negative reflex points, the horse will hollow its back and move away from the pressure, and that's the last thing we want. We want the horse to push up through the back, correct? It's hard enough to get that done on some of the horses, so why would we ever want to impede them from doing that because of bad saddle fit? And bad saddle fit can cause a lot of problems and behavioral problems. So I want to turn in just a little bit so people can see. So what I'm going to do is quickly mark out the 5 negative reflex points that you do not want your saddle to be touching and activating on the horse, because it'll make him hollow his back. So one of the first places is the shoulder. I find the edge of the scapula, which is right there. This is the shoulder bone there, which attaches like this. So when the horse's leg goes forward, the shoulder comes back like this, yes? You can watch it when you lunge him. So if this shoulder comes back and it's hitting the saddle, they start to reach, it hits, they pull back. So you never get this motion, you get this motion. And this is what we saw in this horse yesterday. And it was very obvious he was not willing to extend to the full range of motion because his shoulder was hitting on the saddle every time. Not very happy position for the horse to be in. The next area is along the spine. You have tendons and ligaments on each side of the spine. These, over time, if your gullet of your saddle is too narrow, it sits on these tendons and ligaments, and it makes that very, very sore. I've seen horses, you come up, you touch here, they just drop right away. It's the tendons and the ligaments. It's not muscles. This big longissimus muscle is very thick, very, very supportive. It's a good place for the saddle to sit. But right here on the tendons and ligaments, no, it's not. It's a very tender area, very susceptible. So you need to make sure the gullet of your saddle, you understand what the gullet is, the space between the 2 panels, is wide enough for the horse. How wide does the gullet need to be? I feel along here, right there, the tendons in and the longissimus muscle starts. I can feel it. It's a little bit of a shelf. There's a different feel there. So I feel it on this side, I feel it on that side, and I put my hand through there, and this horse needs at least a 4 to 5 finger gullet. So I want to be able to take that saddle upside down and run 4 to 5 fingers through it. Especially because every time the horse turns, the saddle will shift a little bit to the outside, right? So if you have a really narrow gullet, now your panel's sitting right on the top of that sensitive area. So very, very important about that. So here's our next mark on this horse. It's right there. Now the next area, and this horse, it's very important in this horse, is the length of the saddle. You have your thoracic vertebrae, which the ribs are attached to, and they come down like this. They're very long. You can all envision that, right? So we do not want to go past that last thoracic vertebrae. Well, where is it? We can feel it, number 1, right here. Curves up, goes under the big longissimus muscle, ends up about right there. The easy way is to take where the hair comes together. I don't know why this works out that way, but it does. Take where the hair converges like this, go straight up, it's the same place. That's a pretty short saddle support area. The reason for this lumbar vertebrae, the pieces, or the wings of it, are very short and they're very thin. It's not a good supportive area. Besides the fact that when the horse, especially when the horse canters, there's a lot of motion in the back right here. So if the horse goes to canter and pushes up and it hits the pressure of the saddle, they'll hollow, they'll buck, they'll forebeat, they won't want to canter. So very, very important to stay off this area. We'll put a big X because that's the bucking area. If saddles hit their horses will often buck. Yes, big no-no. So the next one is here, and this rarely is a problem. This is where the ribs come out from underneath the longissimus muscle. We just wouldn't want a saddle to sit on ribs, but that rarely happens in the English saddles. Now the last, but one of the very, very important areas is this triangle area right here. It's a hand's width down from the wither. The reason for this is a totally different muscle. This is your trapezius that goes like this. This is what helps lift the horse's neck and controls what the horse does with his neck. So if the horse has no room, see this right here? There's a cranial nerve, see that? That's a cranial nerve 11. It's not tender, it's just a reflex point. Just like all horses have reflex points. See that? See this? They're all reflex points. Now there's one right there, which will make the horse hollow his back. We don't want that at all. So it's very important to stay off of this. And the other thing we noticed about this horse when it was being ridden, didn't want to stretch. It would stretch and then it'd come back up, and stretch and come back up. That can be a very good indication that as the horse's neck goes down, this muscle widens, but it has no place to go. So it's uncomfortable. Starts to go down because we ask it to, and then it goes, ugh! But that makes it more uncomfortable, so he comes back up. So this horse spent a lot of time kind of going like this, and he could not find a comfortable spot, and it was obvious. We put a saddle on that stayed away from all these spots. Horse was happy. Horse is happy, we're happy. So here's your area that you need to, the saddle needs to stay in. If you stay in here, you're gold. You start hitting these other areas, and they can, especially this shoulder area, you can actually chip off the cartilage at the top of this shoulder bone. It's not bone here, it's cartilage. And some horses have been permanently retired because it actually can chip that off. Because you have to think that the gullet of this saddle is steel. It is hard. The horse breaks, not the saddle. So if this is laying too close here, it hits. If it hits hard enough, it starts to chip it off. So this is very, very important here. So now that we've got this pattern drawn up, let's bring your saddle out and see how it fits.
And that's her saddle.
That's her saddle. Okay, what's one of the most obvious things right off? Right off the bat. Huh? Shoulder, and way too long.
Way too long.
Way too long. You are like 5-6 inches too long. At least 5 inches. Right? And this saddle, the way it's conformed too, wants to sit way back here off of the shoulder. Almost too far, but what it did was it allowed, if you turn the horse a little bit this way so everybody can see. Ooh. But see how this saddle sits so closely up here? Yes, especially once the rider gets on. So you want this to sit open like this. You want to be able to easily slide your hand in here because that's what the shoulder does. The shoulder goes up and like this. So you need to have that space for the shoulder and for that trapezius muscle, correct? Does this all make sense? Yeah. Thing is always trust the horse. If you guys would have seen the difference in this horse yesterday, it would have made a believer out of you. Because the difference in the way he moved in his demeanor and everything was very, very impressive. So we've got a couple problems. We've got this. It's too narrow at the top, too wide at the bottom. It's not being supported on the good longissimus muscle. We've got, it's actually awfully narrow in the gullet for him. I can fit 3 fingers in. He really needs 4 to 5. The length is a big issue. Well, it doesn't hollow too much. But see where it wants to sit on this horse? And see when you put it where it should be, it's like this. So you've got all this pressure back here. So you've got too much of a backward balance. We have the other saddle?
Yeah, go ahead and put it on.
So right off, we see a couple things, don't we?
Huh?
This one is still slightly long for the horse. See this? And what this horse needs is what we call a rear wedge relief. They actually cut off this part of this panel so it hits right here. They make saddles especially for these short-backed horses. So you take off this little gusset part and you just cut this away so it doesn't extend too far down the horse's back. So it stays on the thoracic ribs, the vertebrae. Now this one isn't adjusted for this horse or anything. Michelle was nice enough to let us borrow it, but it's a much better fit than what her saddle was. Now, if you look here, it's not as good as I'd like, but the horse has more room. Right here, see that? It could be a little bit better, but it was enough to make this guy much happier. And the balance of the saddle's much better. If you look at the balance for the rider's much more centered here. The other saddle, if it were in the proper position, would be like this, and you often get great big cannel holes, we'd call them, under here, because there's so much pressure back here that it atrophies the muscle and it starts to dip. So once I learned about saddle fit, it changed my whole idea about training horses. And when you start seeing these resistances, you need to investigate and make sure that the horse doesn't have a valid reason for being like that. They're very amiable. If everything's right, they're happy, they'll do whatever you want. But if they're not, you gotta make sure and go through all the processes of checking everything. Shoes, saddle, gear, chiropractically, all of these things to come together. Okay? Any questions? No? Go ahead.
All right.
I just wish you would all been here yesterday to see the difference in this horse, because yeah, it made an amazing amount of difference.
Once again, this is Will Faber from Art to Ride, my lovely wife Karen Loshba, and here we are all with our good friends in White House, Ohio at the St. George Equestrian Center. Say hi, everybody. And there's Phil, who's a little blary-eyed this morning. All right, everybody, we'll see you next time. Thank you.